hey, I didn't see you there. All right, I'm using an orbital sander, and I'm gonna use some regular simple sandpaper to sand down my board, which I've already started. One thing I want you to notice with the orbital sander, I made sure it was completely done moving before I set it on the table. So with our cutting boards, we gotta make sure it's nice and smooth, and we gotta get in all the nooks and crannies and make sure everything is looking good. So a couple tips that I wanna show you from the work that I've been doing here. One, you're probably gonna use an orbital sander for the main surfaces of your cutting board. You're gonna wanna make sure that you have a sanding sheet on there and that it still has some good roughness to it. If it's out, see Mr. Harris or myself and we'll get you good sheets. Usually we'll have some sitting out. You can definitely tell the difference. This is a fresh one. This is one that's being used, still got some grit to it. And this one that's worn out, okay? When you're sanding, first you turn the sander on, and then you're gonna go in circular motions and cover your entire surface area. It shouldn't be something when you're sanding this that you do it one time around, you go, okay, I'm done. It's gonna take you a while, kind of feel the wood, make sure it's smooth. Another hint I wanna give you, use the vices in the shop, okay? When you start to do the edges, put your wood into the vise, clamp it down pretty securely, and then you can use the orbital sander to get the surfaces, and don't forget to make sure you got nice rounded surfaces, kind of like this. So I'll turn it on, hold your wood, go back and forth on the surface, around your corners, get around the smooth edges, kind of up and down, back and forth, and when done, turn it off, let the orbital part stop spinning, and then set it down so we're not damaging the table, okay? So that's what I encourage you to do with those pieces. Next, I have a lot of nooks and crannies in here. I'll show you here. We got our trench, and we have the hole that we cut. So I'm gonna leave this in the vise because it gives me an extra hand. And I'm gonna use, again, a 120 grit, which is the same I'm using in the orbital sander. And I'm just gonna take a piece off. I don't need the whole sheet. Take a piece off here. And what I wanna do is I want to fold my sandpaper into a size that's manageable for my hands. And what I wanna do is just kind of go back and forth inside the trench and get all the rough edges from the CNC machine or anything that was cutting out of there so it's as smooth as possible. Okay? And I'll work my way around the whole thing. This will, obviously I'll finish after the video is completed here to make sure it's smooth. Don't forget to get inside the circle or whatever shape you use for cutting. I did the ellipse here. And you also want to make sure the edge is smooth around the whole thing as well. Just kind of work your way around, take your time, make sure it looks really good. Now, once you're completed with all the good sanding, you feel pretty confident in your cutting board, you know that it looks really nice. Let's give it one final sand with some 220 grit. Higher the number, less gritty it is. This will give it a nice fine piece. So I'm gonna use the sanding blocks for this. So again, I'm just gonna fold off a piece that's big enough for the sanding block. And again, for the sanding block, you wanna put the sandpaper on the bottom. So if you lift up the two flaps, you'll see there's some nails, sharp edges in there. Push the sandpaper in there, and then push down. Pull your sandpaper tight against the base of your sanding block, and then tuck the rest of the sandpaper in there nice and tight. Okay, now you have that 220, and with this, just give it one final couple back and forths. Make sure everything is nice and smooth. It gives it a little more finer finish. You get all the sides. Make sure you got it as smooth as possible because you want your cutting board to look nice and smooth before you put it into laser engraver to get any design you want on there if optional. And then eventually before we season this with our food grade mineral oil to make sure it's ready to be used. So if you have any questions, see myself, see Mr. Harris, so we can help you make sure that your product turns out nice.